I've seen far too often where people are shrinking, they're cutting back, they're scared, they're feeling deep sense of scarcity because of a student loan. So what are your options? What are the different types of repayments? What are the best ways to save, and when is the right time to pay that off? Should you take all of your income and put it towards this? Should you delay doing other things, whether it's starting a business or taking a vacation or even starting to live your life? I find too many people are doing that. And there are programs out there with loan forgiveness if you work with a nonprofit, but is that the right thing to do?
Let's put more money in your pocket, increase your financial IQ, and create more peace of mind, clarity, and certainty in your life. Welcome to Money Matters, a weekly segment of the Wealth Labs podcast where we tackle the money topics that matter.
In the first segment, we talked about income repayment based upon what income you make and then recertifying that on an annual basis, and that'll determine how much you pay based upon how much you make above the poverty line. The worst part is if you let your income become a poverty level of thinking where you try to make less in order to pay less. That's just going to delay the inevitable of you still owing on this. And I mean, student loans are one of those loans that, I mean, you can get out of almost any other loan, whether it's through bankruptcy, whether it's through modifications, whether it's through default. But student loans, those things follow you around. I mean, what does it take for someone actually to get out of one of these things?
You have to die, and then sometimes
That's
it follows,
not a good plan.
And then sometimes it follows your relatives. So
it does actually follow the relatives.
Yeah, a lot
cases,
of times
right?
Nowadays they're forcing more and more parents to sign on them. So if a child dies early, the parents are still on the hook. They're doing a lot of parent student-based loans where the parents can go in and apply for almost unlimited money, but now the parents are actually the main signer on that loan. So it's actually their responsibility to pay the loan off rather than the child's. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, it's the biggest debt class that exists right now is the student loans. And so they're realizing that this thing's unwinding, it's falling apart, people aren't finding the jobs that they were promised, those kind of things. And so defaults on student loans are at an all-time high, and they know they've got to make some changes, and so they're making those changes.
All right, well, let's talk about asset-based loans and how those work.
Okay, so income-based repayment is pretty straightforward, right? It's going to be based on your income every single year. Asset-based is just going to do the opposite. Rather than you actually recertifying where your income is, you're actually going to now have to show them your entire asset portfolio. And they're going to determine what your payment needs to look like based on that. I'm not seeing that being a very popular way to go. It's a lot more rigid. And usually it's a higher requirement on payments of your income, even though it's based on an asset.
So someone without assets, it's still?
Yeah, someone without assets, sometimes they won't even let you kind of qualify for that. So it's
right, a student that's just graduating right now.
Yep.
And didn't come from a wealthy family.
Yep, they're not going to let them even qualify for an asset-based repayment plan.
When would an asset-based repayment plan make sense?
It could make sense too if you come out of the gate at extremely high income and don't want an extremely high payment, but you have an asset class that proves that you can actually pay that loan off, but can minimize your payment. Sometimes people will do it that way. Because we think about a student loan overall, if we're talking about all the different ways to collateralize debt, right? If we have collateralized debt on a home, that's a really favorable way to go because we have interest deduction, we have a long term. Student loan is kind of almost the second best base scenario, interest deduction and a long term. And so it's not such a bad way to go. So if we're going to come out of the gate at a really, really high income and we have the assets to back it up, it could make sense for us to say, you know what, I'd rather have my payment smaller, but still be making an impact towards the principal and interest. No, I'm going to get it paid off, but now have more control of the cash flow. So that's when an asset-based plan might make more sense.
All right, so I don't really know when that is going to be.
It's kind of a case-by-case basis on each client. And not very many people get those because, as you mentioned, very few people walk out of college with a really high job.
What about when they call the loan servicer and they tell them just that they'll stop it for 6 months? They're still accruing interest during that time. What are those called?
Those are called deferments, right? We just go into deferral, and we try and prove hardship to go into that deferral, right? I've also seen some clients actually sign up for like an online university, take one class because it starts a deferral clock all the way over for them for that semester plus 6 more months.
Are they still being charged interest during the deferral time,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. So that's a dangerous place to go to keep letting that grow and kick it down the road with no intention behind it of how you're gonna handle that down the road.
What ramifications do they have in default, the government and these people?
Like you can't bankrupt a student loan, right? You can't do anything about it. You will pay your student loan off. And so whether the government decides to come out and start garnishing wages, start garnishing assets, putting liens against you, all kinds of things. I mean, nothing's off the table for a student loan.
Right, okay. So what other plans are there other than there's income, there's asset, there's deferment? Is there anything else that could be done to improve the situation with the student loan?
So there are times where it makes sense. If you know you're going to pay off a loan no matter what, right? Right now, the average student loan, if you're going through the government subsidized loans, the interest rates are around 8%. So they're starting to really climb.
That's insane.
Right?
That's
They were
really
back
high.
around 6, and they've just been raising it because once again, they've got to start earning more to pay off.
The 23 trillion in debt that they have
Exactly.
as the government. Just
Yes.
no big deal.
Right. So those interest rates are starting to climb, becoming much more difficult for us because the tuition continues to go up, the cost of education continues to go up. I mean, I paid my way through college. I don't know how you would do that anymore. They say the average cost of college education for the 4-year degree is $25,000 per year right now.
Yeah, and side note, the reason that college is so expensive is because of student loans. If you took away student loans and they didn't exist at all, and people just had to pay for it, that would put a downward pressure. But all of a sudden, if there's money that can come in that's financed and people are only looking at the payment, not even have to look at the payment while they're in school, we see an inflated level of price of tuition. And so I get a little frustrated about that, especially considering there's a bigger promise than delivery on what a college education will give people. We've just seen that that has become diminished over time because more and more people are going and degrees are meaning less and less, because the reality is what we need is people that can truly produce, that have a certain skill set. And when I went through general education, I learned about the food pyramid in nutrition. You know, food pyramid is the stupidest idea ever. It doesn't actually help anything. You know, 6 to 11 servings of carbs, no fats. I guess the brain doesn't need a little bit of fat. I mean, you know, all about fruit and vegetables. Okay, at least that's still somewhat true, but there's even debate around that.
Well, the food pyramid had to pay for the subsidies for the food industry.
Right. So look, let's get to some really practical solutions here. I want to teach you about something called cost of money. It's a relative of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost essentially says if I do one thing, there's a cost of what I give up in order to do that, whether it's the time I spend on that one thing and the time I can't spend on another thing, right? If there's two things going on, it's kind of which are you going to spend your time on? There's a cost for doing that. If I go, though, and I spend money and I don't pay down my student loan, that money isn't just, you know, the dollar, it's what is it costing me on the student loan? It's 8% tacked onto that, right? So cost of money essentially says, what is your highest, best, it's kind of the same thing, net, that's after expenses, sustainable rate of return on your money. So what do you know you can predictably get for long periods of time with your money if you were to invest it? For some people, they don't really know a lot. Maybe they just have money in a savings account. That's not a high rate of return. Other people, maybe they own a business and they can invest certain things in the business, but you got to ask, how sustainable is that? Is that something you can count on a year from now or 3 years from now? So this is something that's a more conservative, realistic rate of return. Now, on the other hand, if you have a loan like an American Express card at 17.9%, that's your cost of money. Anytime you don't pay down that loan, that dollar's costing you 17.9% above and beyond what that dollar is. So that's cost of money. So when you're going to make a decision, if you know you can earn more than 8% investing in starting a business, increasing your skill set so that you can get a raise within the place that you're employed, coming up with an initiative that improves the bottom line of an organization you work for, that you can get a percentage of the upside, well, maybe it makes more sense to do that temporarily than to pay extra towards a student loan or another type of loan like that. You've got to know your cost of money. And so here's an easy way to kind of think of this. Tim, if I'm willing to lend you money at 0%, how much do you want?
As much as you have, all of it.
And how fast do you want to pay me back?
I would not.
Okay, so he wants to pay me back as slow as possible because he knows he can earn more than 0%. Now, when we know our cost of money, if I charge you 1%, what's your answer?
Pretty much the exact same.
Pretty much the same because he knows he can do better than 1%. That's cost of money. So it helps you understand, should you pay something off or not? Now, if I have a loan at 4%, I know I can earn 5% on my money, I'm actually going to pay that loan off faster, earning 5% for the next 5 or 10 years, and then when it grows to a certain amount, just writing one check and paying off the loan in one fell swoop, right? Rather than paying extra to the institution without it lowering my payment, even though it's lowering my balance, which is what happens with an amortized loan, like a mortgage or a student loan, I'm paying extra, I'm paying it down, but they still keep the same payment. It's just that the balance is going down over time, and that actually becomes a risky place.
Yes.
Right? Because
Definitely.
It's not helping my cash flow out. It's something that's deferred into the future. And I call any of the money that's trapped in there equity jail. If it's on a mortgage, right? You have a home attached to it. It's hard to tap into if you need it. Easy to get money when you don't need it. But if you do need it, they're probably not going to give you the loan. So you got to understand your cost of money. right? And this can help you with the student loan, because if you can earn more and then when you get enough money, pay it off in one check, just pay the minimum along the way, you keep more control over your money. But on the other hand, if you're just reckless with your dollars, if anytime money hits your fingers, you love to spend it before it's even there. You actually spend it 3 times over. You spend every optimistic thought you ever have. You think it's only going to get better. Maybe it's better just to pay extra. It really depends on who you are and what you're capable of. So knowing your cost of money, that's important. Another piece is just understanding interest for a minute. See, because when we pay cash for things, there's actually an interest cost.
Absolutely.
It's the interest we forfeit the right to earn, right? It's what we could have earned had we invested those dollars. Now, when we borrow money, it's pretty simple. We pay interest to the institution. That's really straightforward. It's easy to see. Sometimes it's harder to see what you could have earned, but you didn't earn. But they're both a cost. That's that opportunity cost. So it's important to know this, because then it helps you make a decision on whether you want to pay something off now or whether you want to accumulate the money on your own and then pay it off later so you have more control over it along the way.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned, that's the safest place to be, is when you control the cash. I like to control the cash until the institution no longer has control over me or my assets, right?
Right.
So I pay them as little as I possibly can, and when I want to pay them off early, I accumulate the cash on the side where I'm earning interest, and then I can just write out that one check and pay them off. That's the safest place for us to be.
Right.
Now,
method versus objective.
Exactly.
Objective is to pay it off. What are the best ways for you to get there to pay that off?
Exactly, because now if a hardship comes along, I've got all that extra cash on the side, and I can handle that hardship, no big deal, right? I've got solutions and options because I controlled the cash, rather than letting that institution control the cash.
Right. So, look, student loans, be careful if you haven't gotten one yet. Be really calculated about it. If you do have them, what are the things that you could do? The income-based repayment plan, and then you can kind of recalculate that year by year so that you don't get charged interest if you don't pay the full amount of what's owed that year. The next thing is asset-based, which that's a little bit harder to understand where it might fit or qualify for most people. And so be careful with deferment, because you're still getting charged interest. And there's that technique of taking one online course to get more reason for deferment. But you're eventually going to have to pay this. There's almost no way out of it other than to write a check. So earn more, invest in yourself, build up your savings, know what you're up to, and see what you can do to expand your means, to grow what you're up to deliver more value, to solve bigger problems, to get in a more abundant mindset where you're thinking about solutions and solving and value creation rather than scarcity and sprimping and eliminating. No one shrinks their way to wealth. This is a game of building value. How can you do more of it? It's going to help you solve your student loan issue.